which I don't know if any of you have ever used a constants chart, but you guys will like it. Okay, so why does a company borrow money? Obviously, there are a lot of reasons as to why a company borrows the money, but the two predominant reasons is they want to grow. They're going to buy fixed assets that will hopefully help them to grow, or it's to address fast growth syndrome. So it's kind of a fix it from something that's already happened. So with fast growth syndrome, what I mean by that is a company has already experienced the growth. They've got this product that's awesome, and they're selling the crap out of it. And so they've spent a bunch of money. They've got a bunch of money tied up. And they've increased their sales, which means what? They have to increase their inventory. They also have to now increase their accounts receivable. So they're having a bunch of money tied up in the selling process. And so when that happens, a lot of times this growth outpaces their internal ability to generate cash. So through profits, through sales, and whatnot. So they oftentimes need a loan to cover this, to help them get through this fast growth syndrome. And so if we look at the cash flow cycle, that makes it a little bit plainer. So at the top here, we see that we're acquiring inventory. Either that's raw goods or finished product, but it's what we're going to be selling at the end of the day. We purchase this. So money goes out. We store that inventory. We finally make a sale. That sale is not usually collected at time of sale, at point of sale. Oftentimes it goes into accounts receivable, which ties up our money even longer, and then finally we collect that money. And so there's this delay from the time that we spend our money to the time that we collect our money. And so if a company is growing very, very quickly, this days that your money is tied up is also growing. And you're having a lot more money tied up in this cycle. And so you may need cash. You need to borrow money to help continue to grow, help to fund that already seen growth. So let's look at an example here. ABC company, they want to buy a new piece of machinery, and that piece of machinery costs $300,000. In theory, it should increase their sales by $1.5 million. Their profit's going to remain the same, so profit after tax from sales is going to remain at 10%. Accounts receivable is going to increase, and it's going to increase because our sales increased. So now we've increased our sales, and now we have more people who have purchased our item on an account. So our accounts receivable has grown by $75,000. Our inventory also increases by $125,000. We have more. We're having to have a bigger bulk of money tied up in inventory to support our sales. The owners of ABC Company can contribute $150,000 of their own money, so equity. Do they need outside financing? Let's look at the sources and uses of funds. So this is going to be a pretty generic example here. You guys should be able to follow along quite nicely. And I'll post the new slides to Canvas when I get back to my office. But we have our sources. And we have our uses. So let's start with our uses. We are going to use money to buy a machine. And that costs $300,000. We're also going to use money from increasing our accounts receivable. So accounts receivable increase, $75,000. This machine is going to cause an increase in sales, which is also going to boost our inventory by $125,000. Inventory increase, $125,000. So our total uses of funds due to this machine and this uptick in sales is $500,000. Now let's see how much money we have. So it already says that we have equity of $150,000. So we have equity, $150,000. We also should have profit. So our profit is 10% of the $1.5 million. So that too is $150,000. That's all we got. So we have $300,000. And who knows even about the timing of that profit? We're obviously not going to see all that profit up front. So the timing of the profit is also questionable. But there is a gap there. We are going to need 500. We only have 300. So yes, they are going to need some sort of financing. Whether that's a true loan or maybe they factor their receivables. That's a company decision. But there is a gap there between what they need and what they have. So this is an example of growing very, very quickly. They don't have the internal cash there to support their increase in sales. So business development challenges. Healthy companies need good financing. They need good financing so that they can grow and they can create jobs. And what do we mean by good financing? Good financing is long-term, has a low down payment, and has a reasonable interest rate. So it's reasonably priced. It also matches the sources and uses of funds. So what I mean by that is we're not getting a short-term loan to cover a fixed asset. We're not going to be using our line of credit to fund our fixed asset purchase. This line of credit, that's a short-term debt instrument, and our fixed assets obviously going to be there for many, many years. So we need to match our sources and uses of funds. Commercial banks are not excited to lend long-term to small businesses. It's very, very risky for them. There's the risk that the business fails. Most small businesses do fail. There's also the rate risk, so your interest rates are going to fluctuate. Now they've already agreed to lend money at a fixed rate, and now interest rates are going to go up or down, so there's rate risk there. Also, short-term loans are more profitable. So we have this idea of recycling. We're going to re-lend that money, and the more times we can re-lend the same dollar, the more closing costs we're going to generate. Closing costs are profitable. So banks like to make short-term loans. So this causes small businesses to resort to short-term lenders. So they're not matching their sources and uses of funds. This also generally means that their growth capital, that equity, that money that they should be using to spur future sales, is getting tied up into fixed assets. So they're having to use equity to buy fixed assets. And then also at the same time, these good companies are getting marginal financing. And so our role as EDCs is to fix this. And so we've looked at this before. You guys know what amortization is. We've talked about that back in chapter 1. We talked about when a loan is made, if a loan is fully amortized, upon maturity, that loan will be paid off. The balance due is 0. So your interest and principal components are structured in such a way that you're paying your full interest and your full principal, so that way at the end of maturity your loan is paid off. Now a partially amortized loan means that you're paying all of your interest and only a portion of your principal. And so upon maturity you still have a lump sum due. That's a balloon payment. Interest-only loans also exist. This is where you're paying your full rent on your money that you borrowed. You're paying your full interest, and you're paying absolutely no principal. So upon maturity, you still owe the $1 million in this instance. Now, the reason why a company might choose a not fully amortized loan is because it affects your monthly payment obligation. It affects your debt service. So a fully amortized loan is going to cause your monthly expenses to be much higher than an interest-only loan. So your monthly obligation is much higher for a fully amortized loan versus an interest-only loan. So there is some reasons why a company may not fully amortize a loan, but a lot of times the reason why it's not fully amortized is not company choice, it's lender choice. The lender chooses to amortize a loan over 15 years, but it matures in 5. So that way at the 5-year point, balloon payments due, the lender has at their discretion to re-lend that money, or they can tell them to take a walk and find another lender. If they've been a good customer, they will most certainly renew that. So a fully amortized loan is one where the loan is repaid at a monthly level of debt service that consists of principal and interest that upon maturity is paid off. Principal is the repayment of the loan, the amount actually borrowed. Interest is the rent on that loan. So you're renting money from your lender. So we're actually going to calculate debt service today. And to do that, we are going to use a constant chart. I know that some of you are finance majors or have worked as bankers and you're completely comfortable with using Excel or using your financial calculator to calculate the debt service obligation. But we're going to do it this way, and I really actually like this way a lot. It bugged me in the beginning when I was learning how to do this because the numbers that you calculate using your constant chart are going to be a little bit different. Are going to be a little bit different than the numbers you would use with your financial calculator. And that's because these are monthly rates, but we are calculating them in an annual manner. And so, like I said before, whenever you're doing these calculations, when you're doing these calculations, just like with your quality indicator checklist and your spreadsheets, you may see some discrepancy between the true number and the number that you get, and that's perfectly okay because we're ballparking this. And you getting a number that is slightly different than the true number shouldn't make or break the deal. You know, being $1,000 off one way or the other, that shouldn't make or break the deal because it's impossible to estimate future cash flows that closely anyway. So when we're calculating debt service, the first step is to find a constant. And to find the constant, you're finding the intersection between the rate and the term. So for example, a 10% loan for 10 years, 10% loan for 10 years, the rate on that, or the constant on that, is 0.1586. 0.1586. So you take the constant from the constant table, you multiply that by the loan balance, and that gives you your annual debt service obligation. So your principal plus interest that you're paying. And we're calculating this in an annual way. We're not breaking it down monthly. Typically, when you get these numbers from the business owner, they're going to give you annual numbers anyway. So we need to break that debt service into its interest and principal components. So to get the interest component, we take our loan balance and multiply it by the interest rate. So you take whatever amount was lent that you still owe, and multiply it by the interest rate that the bank has told you, your contractual rate. To get the principal, you take your total debt service and subtract from that the interest components, and that tells you how much of your payment is going towards the principal. Your end of year balance is equal to the balance at the beginning of the year minus any principal that you paid. And so your beginning balance for the next year is your ending balance from the previous year. And we're going to do an example of this. So we'll do one here first. And I still have all the formulas typed out. So you guys, if you're still writing, you can look at the left-hand side of your screen. So this is a $250,000 loan, 10% interest for 10 years. So 10% rate, 10-year term. To calculate our annual debt service, we take our loan value, the $250,000 we borrowed, and multiply it by our constant. And our constant we just found, 10 years at 10% was 0.1586. And so that gives us an annual debt service of $39,650. If we want to see how much of that debt service went towards interest, we take the amount that we owe money on, that principal, $250,000, we multiply it by our interest rate, which is 10%, and that gives us $25,000. So of our debt service, of the $39,000, $25,000 went towards interest. The amount that went towards principal is the difference between the annual debt service and the amount we paid principal, or the amount we paid in interest. So the $39,650 minus $25,000 That gives us $14,650. That's how much of our payment went towards principal. So to get our new loan balance, our ending balance, we take our original loan amount, that $250,000, and deduct from it the principal that we paid. So $250,000 minus $14,650 gives us our new loan balance. That's how much we owe at the end of year one. And this becomes our beginning balance for year two. So here's an example that we're going to do. I got one on Excel that we'll pull up and do. Hopefully you guys are comfortable with Excel. But you can also do this with pencil and paper. So our loan amount is $250,000 for 30 years at 9%. Let's calculate the annual debt service and the principal and interest for the first 5 years. So I'll do this with you by hand to start with, and then we'll move to Excel. So the first step here is to calculate, or is to find our constant. So our constant, 30 years at 9%.
0.0966.
0.0966. So we know our beginning balance. It's $250,000. This is year one. Our debt service, or our payments, that is equal to, and that remains, our payment remains equal throughout the life of our loan. So to get our annual debt service, we take our constant and multiply it by our loan amount. So 0.0966 times 250,000. Anyone got a number for me?
24,150.
24,150. Okay, so now we need to see how much of that went towards interest. How much of that annual payment, and again, this can be broken down monthly. You know, you can take 24,150 divided by 12, and you got your monthly payment. But again, this is approximations. We're not getting completely precise numbers here. And so if we wanted to calculate our interest payment, we simply take our beginning balance and multiply it by our rates. So here in this example, so it's beginning balance times 9%. So 250,000 times 9% gives us $22,500. The amount that went towards principal, that is our debt service minus our interest. So the 24,150 minus 22,500 gives us 1,650. And our ending balance is our beginning balance minus the $250,000, or $250,000 minus the principal. So that's $248,350. For year two, our ending balance becomes our beginning balance. Our ending balance in year one is our beginning balance in year two. And we repeat the process. Now it's much, much quicker to do this on Excel, so I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Do you like Excel?
I love Excel.
Good.
It makes things so much easier.
It does make things easier. I'm going to blow this up a little bit for you guys. So you can see here, it's exactly what we wrote down. We have our beginning balance, our debt service, the amount of our debt service that went towards interest, what went towards principal, and our ending balance. So our beginning balance is equal to our original loan amount, $250,000. Easy enough. Our debt service, and remember this is going to stay the same throughout the whole life of the loan. Our debt service is going to be equal to the constant that we calculated. I'm going to put dollar signs around that so it locks it in. If you do $B, $4, then that will always reference this exact cell. Now you can push F4 multiple times to change the way the dollar signs look. Like you could, if you did $B4, then as you drag this down, it will stay in the B row, but it will change the number of the cell. So it'll be 4, B5, B6. You can also do it the other way around too. You can do $4, and that would lock in the 4 row, but allow you to change the B, C, D, E. So you guys can play with it if you're not completely comfortable with locking in values. But it's that constant times our original loan amount. And I'm going to lock that in as well. So F4 locks it in. So that's that debt service that we calculated. We calculated this by hand already. You guys did this. Our interest is equal to our beginning balance multiplied by our rate. And I need to lock in that rate, so it always goes back to reference that 9%. The principal that we paid is equal to our debt service minus what we paid in principal. So $1,650. And our ending balance is our beginning balance minus the amount that went towards principal. Any questions? Now for the second one, you can't just click and drag yet because our second one, our beginning balance is equal to our ending balance. So you have to set that up first. But then all of these, you should just be able to click and drag because we set in those F4s. So if we were to drag this out, let's see, let's do it for 32 years. We see that it's not 100% accurate. Again, it's not accurate because we're annualizing these monthly constants. But again, it keeps us from having to do this on a month-over-month basis. And it gets us a ballpark answer anyway. And it's not substantially off because this loan is supposed to mature at 30 years, and instead it matures at 31. So we're getting a pretty close number here to what we would otherwise get. So anyway, it shows you how to use a constants table and how to amortize a loan from a constants table without getting into all of the Finance 330 stuff. So you're still able to use that tool set using the constants table. Any questions? I know it's a little different than what you guys have done before. And I'll post this Excel spreadsheet to Canvas so that way you can look at the formulas and such that I used. And then hopefully learn from that. Okay, so I have another example here. And I printed this one out for you. So you guys can do this one a little bit yourself. Okay, so we're wanting to know, is it more important to negotiate a lower rate or a longer term? How would you be able to help your company more? By stretching out the term or lowering the rate? What's going to reduce your annual debt service the most? That's basically what we're asking. So for this, you need to calculate or you need to find your constant for the different scenarios. So in the first group, we're saying the term is staying the same. We're reducing our rates from 10% to 4%. Okay. And in the second group, we're reducing our term, or we're increasing our term. So we're keeping the rate at 10%, and we're increasing our term. Let's see which helps us the most. Okay, so I went ahead and put the constants in here for you. And so let's calculate our annual debt service and see how that differs from what the bank is currently offering. So our first row here, is 10% for 10 years. And that is what the banks offer. And the constant for that is 0.1586. So to calculate our debt service, we would multiply our constant by our loan amount. And I know we haven't covered this yet, but our loan amount is 75% of the project cost because the loan to value ratio is 75%. I'm going to lock that in and multiply it by 75% and lock that in too. So my annual debt service, what the bank is offering me, is $11,895. Now, if we were able to talk the bank down in interest, let's see how that changes our annual debt service. If we were to take the difference between the two, we reduce from 10% to 8%, that's saving us $975. So we can go ahead and pull this down. Oh, wait, I didn't lock it in, did I? Okay, so going from 10% to 6% saves us $1,900, and going from 10% to 4% saves us $2,700 in our annual debt service. Now, I don't know if any of you have a loan or not, but when you go to that bank and you start trying to negotiate interest rates, they're not very negotiable on it. Not at all. You know, you might... I've gotten loans from banks where I have gone directly to them, said I have a loan offer from another bank at a lower rate, and they say, sorry, go with them. You know, they're not very negotiable on this. Now, of course, if it were a huge loan for an account they really wanted, they might have a little bit more play, but they're certainly not going to go from 10% to 4%. No way. Not unless you have a lot more collateral that you're going to throw in there with it. But let's look and see what happens if we change our terms. So if we increase the loan. So let's go ahead and calculate our debt service. Again, we just take that constant that we found from our constant table and multiply it by our loan amount. 75% of 100,000 and lock that into. So the bank is currently offering us $11,895 as our annual debt service. If we increase the term from 10 years to 15 years, we're going to save $2,200 in our annual debt service obligation. If we could increase from 10 to 25 years, that would be $3,700. Now, obviously, the bank may not be willing to increase their terms that drastically, but it does show you that by making a slight change in the terms, going from 10 to 15 years, so it's not really that much, even at the same interest rate, we're saving $2,200 a year without even having to negotiate rates. The bank's not going to want to negotiate their rate, but they may be willing to play with the terms. So a lot of times terms are more important than rates. So the years that we have is more important than the interest rates because that gets you a greater annual savings in your cash flow. Any questions? Yes, sir. Get the what?
The formulas for...
Oh, you mean to click on them?
Yeah.
Isn't there a way that you can show the formulas on the screen? Like change the cells to the formulas? Pardon? Oh, there you go. Okay. Does that help? Is that the one you're wanting? So all I did was take the difference between what the bank's offer was and what the modification we made was. So that was $2,200. And I'll put this on Canvas too at the end of class, so you guys can go back and look at it if you need to. And I'll put the spreadsheet on Canvas too. Because we've already talked about that cash flow is one of our biggest concerns. And so we're wanting to maximize our monthly cash flow. I know from a personal finance standpoint, kind of rubs you the wrong way, thinking, well, I'm going to increase my terms. I don't really want to refinance my home and go from 10 years to 30 years to save me monthly on the money. And it's kind of painful. But from a business standpoint, if you're trying to grow, you need that monthly money available to grow, and to have to make different investitures. Okay, so when we are looking at a company, we must take into account the credit, the debt, and the maturity. And you guys have this in your PowerPoint now. All this is in your PowerPoint now. I just added some stuff for you. Bonus material. So first up, is the individual creditworthy? Do they have too much debt? Because too much leverage is going to be a bad thing. Remember we already talked about, bad debt is good because it's a cheap form of financing and it reduces your tax bill. But at the same point, too much debt is bad because it has too great of a burden on you. Maturity, if the investment has funds tied up for a long time, the bank may have to forego another better investment later on. They're tying up their money for a long time. Now, a lot of times, the bank's not going to actually hold the loan on their books. They're going to sell it off in the secondary market. But a lot of these community banks that you end up working with as an EDC, these banks do hold these loans. And that's really the difference between a national bank and a community bank. These community banks, they're going to be able to make loan products that are flexible and can actually work with the companies that you're looking at. These national banks, they have very, very rigid standards. If you're a circle and you're not, and they have square boxes, then you're not going to fit. There's no way about it. They're not going to be able to make you a loan because they're not going to be flexible enough to make that happen. So most of the time, as an EDC, you're going to be working with community banks who are a lot more flexible. Their decisions are made in-house. They get to decide where the money goes. So creditworthiness, credit analysis looks at 4 factors: our debt coverage ratio, our loan to value ratio, the validity of our guarantees, and the integrity of our borrower. And we're going to talk about each of these in depth. So first up, we're going to look at the debt coverage ratio. Debt coverage ratio is your net operating income or your cash flow divided by your total debt service. So how much money do you have coming in to cover your debt service? We're obviously going to want a little bit of a cushion there. So most banks are going to want a debt coverage ratio between 1.25, 1.3. 1.2, 1.3, those are good debt coverage ratios. That means you have 20%, 30% more coming in than you're spending on your debt. A debt coverage ratio of less than 1 should obviously be avoided. It would cost more to service the debt than the company's actually bringing in. So anyone could look at this and say that it should be avoided. But you can use this to determine the maximum amount of money that a company could borrow. So let's do an example here. A company has net operating income of $500,000. Net operating income of $500,000. The bank wants a debt coverage ratio of 1.25. So we can determine what's the most that they can borrow. So if we rearrange this equation, then we can have 1.25 is equal to our annual net operating income divided by our debt service. So multiply both sides by debt service, divide by 1.25, and you get $400,000. This is our total debt service. So the most they could borrow is $400,000 if they have operating income of $500,000 to maintain that debt coverage ratio of 1.25. So if you know 2, you can solve for the third. You can also use this equation to calculate your debt coverage ratio, which we'll do in just a moment. Next up, we're going to look at our loan-to-value ratio. Loan-to-value ratio, this is looking at the value of your collateral. So if you, for whatever reason, did not make your debt service obligation as you promised to do, the bank has gotten some sort of collateral associated with this loan. They could seize that collateral and sell it, and hopefully cover the cost of their loan. To calculate the loan-to-value ratio is the loan amount divided by the dollar value of the collateral tied to this. Obviously, you want this to be greater than 1. You want your collateral to at least cover your loan-to-value ratio. Most lenders are going to want this to be 75, 80%. So they're only going to lend you, 75 to 80% of the collateral. So if you have an asset that you want to purchase that costs $100,000, they're only going to lend you 80. The other 20 you're going to have to find from other sources. That's because the bank is very, very bad at holding assets. They don't want your assets. They do not want your new car or your home. They don't like to maintain it. They are not very good at maintaining it. It causes a lot of lawsuits when you have empty holes in the backyard where pools used to be and people are falling in and breaking their leg. The bank does not want to be in charge of these assets. They want to be able to sell those assets, and they're not very good at selling them either. It's going to take a loss. And so whenever they sell them, they need to be able to sell them for enough to cover your loan amount. Intangibles. So these are the validity of your guarantees. So whenever you take out a loan, if you own 20% or more in a company, the bank is going to require you to personally guarantee that loan. If you own 20% or more in a company, you must guarantee that loan. Now, how good is your personal guarantee? That's what we need to decide. Do you have a good credit score? Do you have a good history of making your payments as scheduled, as promised? What is the integrity of your business? What is the integrity of you as the business owner? There are other factors too, other than those that we can look at in ratios and in hard numbers. Who are the competitors? Can new competitors enter the market easily? Is this something that is not proprietary? Is the pricing of your goods or services linked to your competitors? Do you have a very competitive environment where someone can squeeze you out if they want to? What are the demographics of your customers? Are you selling to very wealthy people? Are you selling extravagant items to wealthy people, so whenever the stock market crashes, all of a sudden they don't have a disposable income to purchase your extravagant item anymore? Or are you buying a necessity? Are you selling a necessity? Is the firm an industry leader or follower? What are the regulations in your industry? Obviously, if you're in the airplane industry, you've got a lot more regulations than a lot of other businesses. If you're selling food, things have to go through the FDA. Is this a cyclical industry? What is the seasonality? What cycle are you in? Are you heavily influenced by economic climates? We need to look at the qualitative factors, not just the quantitative. So 4 out of 5 businesses fail in the first 5 years. And we often see capital market gaps. That's the reason why economic development coordinators exist. Because creditworthy businesses with good ideas are not getting the funding they need. And so we're not seeing full market potential with without the intervention of an economic development coordinator and possibly some public money to help these two meet one another. So we need to fill the gaps. The problem with startups is that they often underestimate cost. You know, we're always optimistic on things we want to do, right? It's difficult to come up with cost, and then we underestimate our problems. We overestimate the revenue and demand for our product. You know, we think it's great. Why wouldn't everybody else think it's great? We underestimate the amount of time and effort to train new personnel. You know, there's only one of you. As you grow, you're going to need more of you. How are you going to train people to do what you do? And they have difficulty in marketing products. That should say marketing. Have difficulty marketing products. So startups are seen as too risky for lenders. So who fills the gap? Remember, 4 out of 5 startups fail in the first 5 years, 80%. We can use the SBA loan guarantees to help fill this. We can use public money, although that's probably not a wise choice because then you're going to use up the money for possible future investments that could turn out to be a good deal. Anyway, the lending process, it starts with marketing. So we look for those possible loans. We look for those possible people who need the loans. We're going to market that we have a program to help people. We're going to screen our candidates. So obviously you're probably going to get a whole bunch of people apply when you say, I have a long-term low-rate interest loan because that's what I do. I'm the economic development coordinator and I have access to public money. I'm going to give you a very long-term loan and a very low rate of interest, and I'm willing to accept more risk than a conventional bank. You would obviously get a whole lot of applicants. You can screen those applicants. Then comes the underwriting. That's making sure that you're making a good, solid decision, that you're actually vetting those clients. Then you need to approve the loan. You have to document that loan, and the big one here is servicing. It doesn't do any good if you make a good, solid loan to a good, solid company if you don't service that money collect. You need to make sure that you're still in touch with them, that you're still helping them if they need it, maybe through IT support, through their business plan, for finding the space that they need, for doing whatever it is to help them do what they do. You need to service that loan, not just on paper, but in person as well. Okay, so if we look at this in a little bit closer detail, marketing. We have to market our program as an economic development coordinator. Maybe you have a revolving loan fund. Maybe you're using SBA loans. But you need to market this. You need to tell potential lenders about it and potential borrowers. You need to tell the lenders what it is that you're doing, how you can help them, and maybe develop ways that you can collaborate. Because obviously you want to maximize those public dollars that you have at your disposal. You want to leverage them as far as you possibly can. You want to make the smallest investment for the largest bang. And so if you work with a local bank, you're going to be able to do that. If you work with lenders, you're going to be able to maximize that money that you have. You also need to advertise to potential borrowers. You need to let them know what services and loan programs you offer. That way you can get help to those who need it. When we're screening our candidates, we need to clarify our eligibility early. We need to let them know up front that to receive this service, to receive this product, to receive this loan, we're going to have to look at the background of your business. What's the nature of your project? How much assistance are you needing, and what type of assistance are you needing? If you have a formal application, that's really going to help you to clarify your eligibility. How do you do this? One-on-one meetings would be great. Town halls. You can meet with architects, accountants. You can present to business groups. You could let your city officials know about it. Mass mailings, advertising in the newspaper or on TV. One-on-one sit-downs are going to yield the best results, obviously. Your goal is to show lenders how you can help them and to show borrowers how you can help them. So you're trying to bring these borrowers and these lenders together, and you're going to create the products that make that happen. So underwriting. Economic development professionals often take on one of three roles. Either they are the direct lender. They have maybe a revolving loan fund that their city has, that they are in charge of. Or they are a subordinate lender. Or they provide a loan guarantee. So here you're providing the rest of the money needed. Or you're using your SBA connections to get them a loan guarantee. Or they're just looking to support the business and seeking a third-party loan. So what does that mean? You're acting as an advocate for both the borrower and the lender. You're the middleman, the guy that's helping them both bend to help each other. And because you're taking on so many different roles, wearing so many different hats, you yourself need to personally decide, is this project viable? And will they have the ability to repay the loan? Because you know what? A lender never forgets. If you bring them a crappy company with a crappy cash flow and they can't pay that debt, that lender's not going to look at you as credible anymore. They're going to look at you and think, oh, well, it's another one of them needy projects. Let them pass out the door. You need to determine, is there technical or management assistance necessary? Do you need to help them utilize the technology available? Do you need to help them get succession plans in, find the right people, and put them in the right places? Do you need to produce a financing plan? And you need to look over this and make sure there are no errors and look for checks and balances. So the approval of the loan is dependent upon the 5 C's. Cash flow, character, capacity, collateral, and conditions. The 5 C's. Cash flow. Can the business pay the debt service with existing cash flow? You don't need to look at forecasts. Forecasts are rarely ever correct. We need to look at profit after tax plus depreciation. Is there enough cash there to pay this loan? Character. Does the borrower have the capability, maturity, character, and will to repay? There are 4 D's of disaster. The 4 D's of disaster are death, divorce, disability, and drugs. If this happens to your person in charge, you're going to have a disaster. 4 D's of disaster. Death, drugs, disability, divorce. Capacity. Does the company's history demonstrate the capacity to manage a loan repayment? Do they have the financial capacity? And do they have the managerial capacity? That's 2 separate questions. Do they have the actual ability to make the payment? And do they have the people there with the will to make it happen? Collateral. Do they have the required minimum collateral for the bank to get involved? Is there a second way out? If they choose to not repay their loan, can the bank sell their collateral and get the loan value back? And conditions. How does the external economic climate affect the risk? So when we structure a loan, there are some different terms that we need to know what they mean. First up is fees. These are going to cover the administrative costs and the processing of the loan. Interest rates. Most interest rates are based on market rates. So you would need to be comfortable with what current mortgage rates are, what current commercial loan rates are. You must also determine if rates should be fixed or variable. Obviously, with these small businesses that we're talking about, they're going to prefer a fixed loan payment. They're going to want a fixed interest rate. So that way they can predict with certainty year over year on what their payment will be. We need to know what security there is, what collateral is being pledged. We need to make a visual inspection of this collateral. We need to make sure it is what they say it is. Because remember, we already said that these small business owners, they're very confident, often detrimentally so. Maturity. Let's look at the length or term of the debt repayment period. We already talked about how if you can stretch out that term, you're going to get a lower monthly debt obligation. What are the repayment conditions? Do we have a uniform payment schedule where you pay the exact same amount every month? Do we have unequal payments based on your earnings? So that way, on good months, you're paying a larger amount. On poor months, you're paying a smaller amount. Is there a lump sum repayment? Does this have a balloon payment associated with it? Do we have extended amortization? There's lots of different factors that are going to go into structuring this loan. Lots of things that you need to think about. There are ways to reduce the risk to the lender. First up, one of the favorite ways to do this is through a guarantee, a loan guarantee. And we have a whole chapter devoted to this later. Actually, we have two. But a loan guarantee is essentially you promising to pay someone else's debt if they don't. There are federal programs for loan guarantees, such as the SBA 7A program. And we're going to talk about that in the whole chapter later. But your city can also offer its own guarantees. So this would really allow you to have great leverage on those dollars that you have. So if you have a pool of money and you were to offer loan guarantees on projects for banks, so that way banks would be willing to lend to these individuals, then your loan guarantee would only spend any money if that person defaulted. So if you were doing a good job of vetting your clients and making sure they're credit worthy, if you really believed in them, then this guarantee should not ever cost you anything. But if in the event that they didn't repay, then you would have to pay the difference beyond whatever the collateral didn't cover itself. So a loan guarantee promises to pay what they don't. A compensating balance. This is where a requirement that you maintain a specific amount of money in the bank, which would be a percentage of the loan. So you would keep a percentage of the loan in the bank, so that way if there was a default, the bank could use that. So the borrower would maintain that cash. Prepayment penalties. So if you pay your loan off early, there's a penalty associated with that. Now, this does exist sometimes. If a bank goes to a lot of trouble for you, usually it's community banks, they go to a lot of trouble for you, make a very unique loan for your situation, they may have prepayment penalties if you pay it off super early. So if you paid it off, 2 or 3 years in, then there may have to be a penalty associated with that. There are prepayment penalties on most consumer products, but in business loans, we see them occasionally. Leverage requirements. So you would need to be able to maintain specific financial ratios. So once this bank has lent you money, you probably can't borrow money from anyone else. You need to make sure that you're following your leverage requirements. Extended amortization schedules. The amortization is longer than the life of the loan, so you have a balloon payment. That was that partially amortized loan figure that we saw earlier, where at the end of the loan's life, you still have some lump sum due. Variable interest rates. This is where your interest rate varies dependent upon market rates. It may get you a low rate today, but it's certainly going to adjust. You see that a lot with commercial loans. It may be fixed for a specific amount of years and then be allowed to vary by a certain percentage every year thereafter. I have a commercial loan. Let's see, it's 5 years old. And that loan, when I bought it, my rate was 3.95%. Fixed for 5 years, and it could vary by 1% every year thereafter. So it's a 15-year amortized loan that I've had it for 5 years. So now this February, my loan rate will increase. It'll probably go up to 4.95% because it's allowed to go up or down 1% every year. So it's going to cause my payment to change. It's going to cause my payments to increase. Now, I'm still happy with that. I don't want to refinance because current market rates are like 5 3/4 right now. So I'll still have below market rate cost, but it is an adjustable rate. But there is a cap to that adjustment. A sinking fund. This requires the borrower to deposit funds regularly to assure repayment. So it's very similar to that compensating balance. It's requiring that borrower to maintain cash at the bank. Convertibility. This allows the lender to convert their debt to equity. So you can convert your debt to common stock. And warrants. This allows your lender to purchase stock at a predefined price. Loan servicing. So loan servicing, there are some indications of potential problems. If we see payment pattern changes, you see any bounced checks, see changes in their loan payment account, if their financial record keeping deteriorates, if their income stream fluctuates greatly, or if the borrower conceals information, there's probably going to be a problem. But the borrower doesn't have to, if the borrower sees this happening, if the lender sees this happening, they can do things to help mitigate that. They can see that there's a problem arising and help to mitigate that by lengthening the amortization. That would be one option. So now they've taken their 10-year loan and stretched it to 15 years. That's reduced their monthly payments. They could require interest-only payments. So we already talked about how a bank is not very good in the asset management business. They're not very good at owning homes and owning businesses and owning cars. They can't sell them for what they're worth. It's not their role. So a bank, specifically a community bank, they're going to work with you. They're going to, you go and talk to them and say, look, I'm having a really hard time. We're in an off season right now. Our sales weren't as good as our projections. Is there anything we can do in the interim? They'll probably look at you and say, look, make interest-only debt payments. We'll work with you for 2 to 3 months here. See if you can get that cash built up, and then we can return to our previous debt repayment schedule. Or you could lower the interest portion on your debt, even to reduce that interest rate. So if you're servicing a loan, so you've already made the loan, and now we're looking at it, and these people, they're making their payments on time, they're current, no action needed. Continue what you're doing. Maintain normal screening. The payment is 10 days or more overdue. You need to contact that owner. Maybe they just forgot. That's happened to me before. I forgot what day of the month it was and forgot to make my loan payment. My loan officer called me and said, hey, Jessica, did you realize today's the 1st? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I've been on summer break. I didn't know what day of the month it was. If they're 30 days or more overdue, you might need to renegotiate or restructure terms. These banks are going to work with you. If you've been a good customer, you have good solid collateral, they're going to want you to continue because they're going to make more money off of you continuing that loan than them selling that collateral. Here are some basic facts of life. Some of them are painful. A lender can kill any deal. Approval is not based on just the strength of the company. Economic development professionals, they are going to have to build relationships with lenders so that way they're credible and they can bring them opportunities. Economic development packages should package deals that will happen. You shouldn't waste your time on on hopefuls and wannabes. You need to focus on deals that can actually happen. Your time is very limited. Your resources are very precious. You know, cut through them very, very rapidly and find those diamonds in the rough. Lenders never forget. If you bring them a bad company, a bad project, and they make a loan on it and they don't make money, they're going to remember that next time you come in the door. They're going to remember, oh, this guy, he brings in losers, people who couldn't get loans to start with. And so you need to make sure that those loans are good. And beware of startups. 80% fail in the first 5 years. Avoid turnarounds. Turnarounds should be treated just like startups. Trying to turn around a company. If you're trying to turn around a company and not replace management, avoid it altogether. If you're trying to turn around a company and you're doing that turnaround by replacing your management, you should treat it as a startup. Beware of interim financial statements. They're not getting the whole picture. Involve lenders in the deal early. They may want specific things done. They may require specific paperwork. If the lender is not responsive, then you may need to pack up and move on to the next lender. You need to get them involved early. Follow-up is critical. You need to make sure that these loans are being serviced properly. Public subsector financing tools significantly reduce private sector risk. So by using those tools in your toolbox, you can really entice lenders to make loans that they may not otherwise make. So you're really reducing that private sector risk. The public sector, you as EDT, and the bank sector, you each make your own credit decision. Just because you think someone's creditworthy doesn't mean the bank's going to think they're creditworthy. So you need to be on the same page. And you need to learn the banker's language. Know what these financial ratios are. Understand the terminology that they're using so that way you can communicate to them in a believable manner.